There. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Elevate's very first Working Wednesday webinar. My name is Lizzie Gray, and I'm the project coordinator for Connected Lane County. And today I'm joined by Rachel Ulrich. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am an HR consultant. I run a company called Are You Talking Consultants. And I used to work in HR for Pacific Continental Bank for a long time and have been in human resources for more than 20 years. So I think I've probably interviewed a couple thousand people over my lifetime.
Whoa.
Yes.
So you're an expert.
I've done this a little bit, so hopefully I can teach a few things.
Great. So while Rachel leads us through the webinar, please feel free to type in any questions that you have for her as they arise. They'll stay in that chat box, and then when we get to a point in the presentation where we're ready to take some questions, we'll go ahead and read through. And we'll get to all your questions, so please don't hold back, and remember there's no such thing as a silly question.
True.
All righty, Rachel, go for it.
True. Okay, let's get this PowerPoint up and running, and that will hopefully get us kicked off. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen, and we're going to have some slides that go along with the discussion. I can't see the chat questions, but Lizzie can, and so she's going to tell me if you've got a question you've put up there or the responses to questions I ask. And this is really meant to be interactive. Because this is supposed to help you get a job. That's the whole goal. So to start with, I'd like to ask you to use the chat box and let me know if you already have an interview set up or if you're just starting to look for jobs for this summer. So if you could type that in, that will help me gauge the conversation a little bit. So type those in. Lizzie will let me know when she's got some answers in.
Oh, great, already. It looks like one participant is still looking for jobs.
Okay.
Thank you for jumping on that, Amanda.
All right. Well, Lizzie, just flag me when you've got some more answers. That will help me. Okay. Well, the goal is to teach you some techniques that when you do get an interview set up, and I'll throw in a couple more tips specific to looking for jobs. But when you do get that interview, I want to help you be really confident when you go in. What do you have?
One more response. Looks like Haley had a job lined up for the summer, but it might be canceled due to COVID.
So still looking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I have three main points to make. The first is to do your homework ahead of time. I'm sure you're sick of homework, but got to do some homework before a job interview and before you apply for a job. So I'll try and work that in as well. And then assuming your interview is going to be this way, virtually, which is how almost all of them have turned now to a virtual interview using Zoom or any other program to help with how to prep your environment so you have your best foot forward in the environment part of it, and then finally how to get yourself personally ready for that interview. So let's jump in on that. So doing your homework ahead of time. So the first thing to do is look at the job ad. So whether you're looking for jobs or you're getting ready for an interview for a job, go back to the job ad and all the clues are there. Everything is inside that ad for what they're going to ask you about. Sometimes we come up with all kinds of questions and things that we should prep for and all the things you want to say. And those are good to have prepared, but really make sure you understand what it is they said they wanted. And specifically, you're going to be looking for 3 skills that they say they need, at least 3, and at least 2 types of experience that they're looking for. And I'm going to help you decide how you can take what you've done in the past and turn that into an answer when you get into the interview situation. The second thing you want to do is think about it. If you were interviewing somebody for this job, what would you ask them? What would you want to know? So put yourselves in the seat of the hiring manager and say, if I was in charge of hiring this job, what would I ask people? And that helps you come up with your questions. So I'll give you a hint. Anymore, most people interviewing for jobs like to use what we call behavior questions. So they tell you to tell them a story. They want you to tell them about an experience. So instead of being able to say yes or no, you have to talk a little more. And so a lot of times they start the questions with, tell me about a time when. So they will say things like, tell me about a time that you felt very proud of the work you did on something. Tell me when you felt the most successful. Tell me when you were frustrated. Tell me about a time you disagreed with a teacher or one of your peers, and how did you go about resolving that problem? And then they want you to explain what was the situation and how did it resolve itself. And so these are things that it makes sense for you to think about ahead of time. So you have those stories ready. As soon as they say those words, it triggers for you, oh yeah, this is where I talk about this situation. It's really hard to make these stories up on the fly when you're sitting in a meeting because your brain is thinking about everything else. And when you try and think of an example right there on the spot, you're probably going to freeze. So if you plan ahead, this will help you get past that potential issue. When you talk about things, especially the tricky ones, like talk about when you got frustrated or talk about when you didn't agree with somebody, what they're looking for is when you get rattled, when you get upset by something, how do you deal with it? So they want to know, do you storm out? Do you yell? Do you say all kinds of cuss words? You know, how do you deal with these situations? And you probably don't, and you don't want to say that you do. So make sure that you have in your mind a time where you work something out. Maybe you took a breather, maybe you took a walk around the block. Maybe you had to go write things down and go back, or maybe you just had to work through it in your head. You had to make yourself think of the other person's point of view and come to terms with that. But think about those situations ahead of time, because the way you tell the story and how you resolved it will tell them how you'll be in the workplace. So they're looking for good and poor traits that you may display at work. So when you start thinking through all those stories, and even when you go back to the skills and the experience, you need to come in ready with, this is what I did that exhibit those traits. But you need to keep those stories short. I can't tell you how many times I sat through a story that went on and on and on, and they told me the name of their 3 best friends, and those people went to the store, and then they came back, and then I was sitting in the car, and then I don't care. And none of that matters for the person who is doing the interview. They want you to answer the question as succinctly as possible. So keep it short, but make sure you don't put negatives in there. So if you think that you're the victim of a bad boss or a bad teacher or a bad friend, don't bring those stories to the interview. I've had more than one interviewee that came in and told me that they got fired from their last 3 jobs, but it was not their fault. And they explained in depth why each time it was not their fault. And I could see in the telling of their story why they'd been fired every time. Don't be that person. Don't be the one saying something bad about somebody else. Even if you get an uncomfortable question like, I saw you only work for 3 weeks at this place. What happened? Even if you quit because of something really negative, find a way to talk about, you know, I didn't do my homework before I got into the job situation, and I hadn't asked the right questions to find out how many hours I was going to need to work. And so I needed to end that job in order to look for one that would fit within my requirements. And my understanding is this job fits within those timeframes. So even if you're answering about something negative, find a way to not put the blame on the company or another person. Take full responsibility for what happened and say what it is you're looking for now. So make sure when you do have a company that you're either applying for the job or that you're going in for an interview, that you check them out ahead of time. So one of the worst things you could do going into a company is to say, well, what exactly does this job do? After they've already put all that information in their ad. Or, so what exactly do you do here? It just shows that you haven't put the time and effort into finding out what they're looking for and what they do or make there. So an example of that, and we're going to work through an example here with a job that's out there right now for Home Depot. So let me see if this will connect up to the Home Depot site. Let's see if we can get there. Okay. Lizzie, did that come up?
It did not.
Oh, okay.
Did it pop up on your end?
Yes, it did. So it's okay if it didn't, we'll go without it.
Okay.
So in this example, and you can do this at home, let's get back to where we were. Okay, hopefully my screen came back.
Yes, it's still there.
Okay, so if you would go to the Home Depot on your computer at home, it would pull up information about what Home Depot does. And most of us understand completely what Home Depot does. But if you look through what they're working on right now, like they're highlighting all kinds of outside equipment, right? Home repair, home maintenance, and gardening. So when you got to the interview, it would be fairly easy to say, I see that you guys are working really hard on the gardening season or the home improvement season. And I'm really interested in that because I'm doing a garden with my family, or I've been working, I had a landscaping job before. So you'll be able to target what's current in their work environment if you've taken a look already. If you go to their careers page, a lot of times they'll tell you about what the culture is, what kind of environment they're trying to build there. And that will give you some good clues for when you ask questions, to ask them to tell you how those things show up in the work environment for the position you're applying for. So I'm going to show you an ad right now. This is an ad that I pulled off of Indeed. And if you're looking for jobs right now, Indeed is a fantastic place to go because companies can put their ads there, but also Indeed goes out and finds ads that are on other pages or on companies' sites. And so they tend to have a lot bigger collection. Plus you can put a lot of information in your search. So you can say how many miles away you want it to be, if you are looking for a specific type of job, if you're looking for a beginning job, or if you're looking for seasonal work or things like that, you can put that in. So I actually I didn't ask for any specific job title. I just wanted something in Eugene and Springfield. And then it pulled up hundreds and hundreds of different positions, and I started scanning through to find ones that you might be looking for. And so this one came up. It's a cashier position at Home Depot. And it actually is two jobs in one, because if you read through the ad, they're looking for a cashier, but they're also looking for a head cashier. So they have two types of positions they are advertising for. So if you look in this, we'll go back to my point was find 3 skills that they're looking for and 2 experiences they're looking for. So when you look at this ad, they're talking about wanting somebody playing a customer service role with fast, friendly, accurate, and in a fast, friendly, accurate, and safe environment or service industry. That right there starts giving you the clues on what skills they're looking for. So when you think back on your experience, if this is your first job ever, sometimes it's hard to come up with why you would be the right fit for this job. But if you think about times that you had to do something fast, or you had to be friendly, or you had to be accurate, or worry about being in a safe environment or creating a safe environment, you have these experiences in your work, in your life. Probably from school, possibly in your home environment or being around other people. You've already found examples in your life that you were very quick on turning something around. So maybe it was an assignment, or maybe the next door neighbor said, you know, hey, would you go get this for me? And you were able to go and do it quickly and brought it back. And he said, wow, that's amazing. You got exactly what I needed. And you know that doing that with a smile is really, really important. The same thing is true, especially with accuracy in your schoolwork. You can point to examples, but you need to think about it ahead of time. So you can pull those examples out and share them in the interview process, because you may not have experience that says, you know, I was a cashier at Gray's, and so I already know how to do this, this, and this. If you have that experience, fantastic. It's a lot easier to demonstrate that you know the knowledge, et cetera, you have the knowledge, et cetera, to meet what it is they're looking for. It's a little tougher when it's your first job, but you can do it. You can find ways to explain it. The other thing I talked about was experience, how to explain what experience you've had. A lot of times, like in this situation, they talk in here, let's see where it is. They're talking about needing to monitor and maintain the self-checkout area and processing, cashing out and returning items. All of that involves computer work. If you've run a computer, you can do these things. So if you talk about your experience on computers, especially working on projects, you can make the connection between that work and working in these areas. So data input on schoolwork is the same thing as in the workplace. You're entering information accurately. You're checking to make sure the information that comes out makes sense. And so if you can draw that connection, that will be helpful for them to visualize you in that role as well. In the head cashier position, they're talking about more advanced things. If you have anything that you can add to the tool rental, special services, returns, supervising, coaching, training, if you've done things, whether this is a club that you've been involved in and you've been in charge, and so you've helped to organize the activities of others and hold them accountable to deadlines, you can absolutely draw comparisons between that experience and the experience they've asked for here. But go into that meeting and interview ready to explain why being the head of this club is comparable to being in a cashier or head cashier position and what you liked about it. So be ready with those stories. All right, so before you get going on the interview itself, it's very similar to this meeting today. You need to make sure you're ready to go. So first off, you need to check your technology. If it's on Zoom, you need to make sure you've already downloaded Zoom and that you've done a test. Does your microphone work? Does your camera work? Do you have a good Wi-Fi signal? I found out in my house, if I sit in one section of the house, the Wi-Fi goes in and out and I keep losing connection. I don't sit there for meetings anymore. So you need to make sure everything's working well in advance of the meeting, because you don't want to be freaking out when it's time to do your interview and you can't get the program to open or you don't have the password. Usually they send you a link, test the link, but also write down the link and the password and the meeting ID, if they have one. Write it down and have it by your computer, because sometimes when you hit the link, now it asks for the password and it was on the previous screen. And if it doesn't auto fill in, you're bouncing back and forth. So if you have that all handy, it's easier to get in front of it. The second thing is take a look at what's behind you. So behind Lizzie, she's got a whiteboard. And I noticed that. I'm sure you noticed that. Behind me, I have a mirror and a painting. So it doesn't matter what's behind you. And there are ways that if you want to play around in Zoom or any of the other meeting things where you can either completely black it out so it looks like there's nothing behind you, or you can have a beach scene behind you or New York City or whatever you want. A lot of places suggest that if you're not really sure what's going to be behind you, select the option that blacks out everything behind you, so you don't have to worry about your environment that you're in. But make sure you test the camera so you see what it is they see, because you know, if you've got some crazy poster on your wall that you don't want to have to explain, make sure that you're turned in a way that the camera doesn't see that. This is the hardest one, controlling interruptions and disruptions. Wherever you are when you do this, more than likely it's a space that other people have an uncanny ability to come into, or there's stuff going on in the next room, or you're in a room where you can't get any privacy at all. And so you have to think ahead. Like for me, I have a beagle, and the beagle only barks when I'm on one of these calls. She just goes insane. She sees a FedEx truck or something and she goes insane. So I know that. And so I have asked somebody else in the house to keep her occupied in another part of the house. And if she starts barking, try to get her as far away from where I am as possible. Now, in those situations, I often start my meetings by saying, I just want to forewarn you that I may have a beagle that starts barking, and I'm going to try and ignore it, and I hope you can try and ignore it. Hopefully it doesn't interrupt our conversation. Or I have a little brother that's screaming, or I have neighbors that you can hear everything they're saying in the next room, or my mom tends to just burst into the room whenever I'm on something. Any of those things, you can disclose it ahead of time if you'd like. But your best bet is to think it through and try to make sure that very few of those things happen, if at all possible. If you have your phone close to you, make sure you turn it off, or turn the ringer off and the sound off so it doesn't interrupt. Don't have things around you. Like, you're going to want to have notes. Keep them as close to the keyboard as possible so you can glance at them, but you don't want to be turned this way reading them while you're supposed to be having a meeting. It's very disruptive. The same things with eating something. Somebody told me the other day they had an interview, and the interviewee said, I have a really short lunch break, and so I'm just going, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to eat my sandwich while you're talking. Don't do that. Find a way to stuff that in your mouth right after the interview, but don't do it on screen. That just doesn't look good. So that's it on that. Then finally, control your on-screen look. We've heard lots of jokes about people showing up in their pajamas to meetings. Funny, but don't do it. You want to dress for the interview pretty much like you think the person who's interviewing you is going to be dressed at that same level. So if they're probably going to be wearing a suit, you don't have to wear a suit, but have a button-up shirt and probably a tie, or at least a button-up shirt and a sweater or something like that. You're going to want to make sure that you present the image that you think they want you to bring to work every day, or maybe a little nicer. If you show up and you're wearing just a t-shirt kind of look, I'm going to be worried that you're not going to know how to dress for work. Even if I provide a polo shirt for you or something, I just need to know that you're going to show up looking clean and ready for the job. Be conscious of how dark the room is, or if there's any lighting that's going to make it look like you're sitting in the dark, because it's really hard to see you. And the whole idea of these meetings is to read your facial expression. I can't read your body language, but I can at least read your facial expression. If I can't see your face, not good. Don't wear something that's really loud that all I'm thinking about is what on earth is up with that shirt. You don't want that to be what I'm thinking about, okay? And finally, when you're talking to somebody on screen, you want to make sure your face is kind of centered in the screen. and that you're looking right at them. Now, if you have an interview in person, or you have an interview on a through virtual means, in both cases, everybody always says, look them straight in the eyes. Well, I don't know if you've ever sat in an interview and looked somebody straight in the eyes. It looks like you're challenging them. And it can get creepy really fast. So really where you're supposed to be looking at them is right here in the forehead, right between the eyes, right above. That allows you to think about what you're saying, but make it clear that you're fully attentive to somebody. So that's a little trick. Okay, before I head to the next slide, any questions? Nothing yet. Okay, be thinking of questions, because at the end of these slides, after this, I need questions from you, and ask me anything. Okay, so before you go into an interview, you need to prepare yourself. So you've done your homework, you've thought of your stories that explain your skills and your experiences and how they relate to this job. And you've made sure your technology is set up in a way so you can give your best focused interview possible. But you need to get yourself personally ready to be in an interviewing mode. So first of all, you need to be sitting up straight and talk to the person like they're somebody that you respect. I say this and it seems so obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've sat in interviews with people that are slouched down in the chair and they say, yeah, no, I don't know, maybe. And I just think, did you think about this interview before you came in here? Can you speak in full sentences? I'm very concerned about how that's going to go in our time together in this employment. I can't picture you in my work environment. So you need to speak respectfully. You need to be clear. Even if you're shy, you can completely speak with respect and from the heart and clearly, and you're looking them right here so they don't think that you can't look at somebody. Secondly, keep your chin down a little bit, not like this, okay? But when we're nervous, our chin tends to go up. That's just not the best look in the world. And what happens is when your chin goes up, it restricts your vocal cords. It makes it really hard to talk and push the sound out. So if you're feeling really tight, like your voice isn't coming out, tip your chin down just a little bit. You're going to open up your throat a little bit, and it's easier for you to push sound out. The next thing is, before you start the interview, you're going to do a breathing box. So I'm going to show you what a breathing box looks like. So when you do a breathing box, you're thinking in your mind about a box that you're drawing a square, okay? So you're going to inhale for 4 counts. You're going to hold it for 4 counts. You're going to exhale for 4 counts, and you're going to keep it exhaled for 4 counts. Okay, we're going to do one right now. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, breathing in for 4. Hold it. Blow it out for 4. Hold it out. Okay. If you do that a couple of times, your breath starts coming a little bit easier. You relax. You stop thinking obsessively about, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, I'm so nervous, I'm so nervous. You start thinking about your breathing, and your breathing is really important when you're sitting in an interview. And if you find yourself getting tight, you can feel your chest is getting tight or your throat's getting tight, just silently breathe in and out and think about your breath, okay? Just slow your heart rate down. Okay, finally, no, not finally, one more time. Make sure you're 5 minutes early. If possible, be 10 minutes early, but definitely be 5 minutes early. Because if you're going to experience technical difficulties, it will be when you wait until the last minute to try and get in. And all those things I just talked about being tense, you're going to be a wreck because you're frantically trying to get into the meeting. So be there early. When you do an in-person interview, we ask people to be there 10 to 15 minutes early. Same thing when you're doing a virtual. It's okay if you're just sitting there with a blank screen until they sign on. It's much better when they come on screen, you're already there. Okay, now, finally, squeeze your thumb. This is weird. So giving you more techniques to use to calm yourself. Sometimes emotions start to get to you. Sometimes if you're telling a really emotional story, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I think I might cry, or I'm gonna like get really tight. So this is a reflexology tip. So on your hand, if you squeeze this part right here, this is easier to do for me. If you squeeze very hard in that fleshy part, it hurts a little bit. So it depends how bad you got to do it. But for whatever reason, when you squeeze in there, it helps pull your emotions in. It just tightens up everything in the face. It's tied to a lot of things. I haven't been able to figure this out. I looked at different sites. It's the weirdest thing. But anytime you feel like your emotion is starting to get the better of you, squeeze that. You can do that in your lap. Nobody knows you're doing it. But it's a really good way to gain control of your emotions and what's going on.
That's great.
All right. So at the very end of the interview, they will say to you, what questions do you have? Do not say, nothing, I'm fine. Don't do that. Have at least 2 questions ready to ask when you get there. Have your notebook and have them written down, because nothing is more impressive than seeing that somebody's prepared for an interview. So I've given you a couple suggestions here for you to be able to use. So the first one is, what does a typical day look like for this position? Or maybe what does a typical week look like for this position? And they will almost always say to you, there is no such thing as typical. Most jobs don't have a typical day. But then they'll go on and explain, well, we usually have a team huddle on Tuesdays at 10 in the morning or 9 in the morning. Or when you first get to work, you're going to have to scan this board to see what new specials are on, or whatever. So that's a good way for them to give you an idea of what your typical day looks like. Again, don't ask them, what exactly do I do in this job? They're going to think you didn't read the ad. Another question would be, what would success look like in 90 days? So what are their expectations for you? I mean, if you think you're rocking it after 90 days and they don't, you kind of needed to know that earlier on. What were they looking for from you? If you were supposed to memorize their entire inventory in the first 90 days, it would be really nice to know that before you walked in the door. So ask about that. You can ask the person who's interviewing you, what do you like best about working here? That's a good way for them to open up about when they started and what they liked about it, what they've learned over their time. So those are just 3 examples of questions you can ask. You can come up with your own as well. So here's a big warning. Do not ask about pay. They will talk to you about pay when they're ready to talk to you about pay. They either put it in the ad, and that's their decision, or more than likely, they're going to assess your experience and your answers, decide what your starting pay is. You can ask them, so what are the next steps? And they will hopefully tell you, okay, we'll have you interview with this other person, or we'll call you back in 30 days, or we're going to have you do some sort of sample experience. So they'll tell you what the next steps are. That's okay to ask that, but do not ask about the pay. Believe me, they'll tell you about the pay and they know you're worried about the pay. So let them decide when they're going to talk about pay. All right, so that's what I've got.
Perfect.
Now I want to hear the questions.
We do have some questions waiting in the queue.
Excellent.
Thank you, Rachel. That was wonderful. The first question is, if you can speak multiple languages, do they ask about that in the interview? And I guess I would follow up and say, if they don't, how could you weave that in?
Mhm. Yeah, you should definitely find a way to put that into your answers. And so, um, speaking multiple languages is a great skill. And a lot of times anymore, they will ask in the ads, they will put it in the ads if they really want that or if that's a preferred skill. So if you've seen that in the ad, make sure you respond to that and find a way to work it into your story. But just blurting out, oh, and I speak a couple languages, you need to work it into why does it benefit them? So if you're telling about customer service, say, you know, I'm really well known as somebody who always tries to find out how to help other people. Because I speak Spanish, that's allowed me to help a lot more of my neighbors or my friends at school. So work it into your story.
That's great. That's great. Ooh, here they come.
Oh boy.
The next is, company culture is really important to me. How can I figure that out in a virtual interview? What questions should I ask?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
So most companies are very proud to talk about their culture. So I think the first is to pick up from their website what they say about their culture and work that into your question. So I see on your website that company culture is very focused on treating employees like family. Can you give me some examples of how that has come out in the work environment? If there isn't a question that really points to what you're most interested in, then I would ask a question that says, culture is important to me. I particularly am interested in working for a company that works specifically with the community needs. Can you tell me how this company is involved with community?
That's great.
Those are good questions that will prompt that conversation and alert them to how important that is to you.
That's great. The next question is it okay to ask for a moment to think if you lose your train of thought or get nervous? And what's the best way to do so?
Yes, absolutely. I'd much rather you did that than just talk endlessly. And I know that you've lost your train of thought and you have no idea how to get back to where you were at. So I think your best bet is to say, just put up a finger and say, hang on 1 second. I need to pull my thoughts together.
Mhm.
And then if you need to look somewhere else so you can get in your head and think about those things, that's totally fine. And then come back with it. If you can't answer a question, it's okay. You can say, I'm sorry, at the moment, I just can't think of an answer to that. If I think of one after the interview, can I email it to you?
Very nice.
That's totally fine.
That's great. That's great. Another question. If I have skills that don't necessarily have to do with the job, should I still mention them?
Only if you can make it clear how it would benefit the company. So let's say, for instance, you're very good at transcribing in Russian. This company, let's take the example of the Home Depot job. There's not a way that you're going to be able to say that that makes sense. You can say, I have a lot of hobbies relative to languages. I love languages and I love helping people out, even when they're struggling in this language. And so I'm hoping I could apply that. That's totally reasonable.
That's great. What is the best follow-up question you've been asked in an interview as the interviewer?
Hmm. I might have to get back to you.
Send me an email.
No, the ones that um, ask me about success, what success looks like, those have been really good. Ones that say, I want to grow with this company. Can you tell me potential jobs I can move into over time? That lets me know that they're thinking long term, which employees don't stay long-term anymore. So when somebody says something long-term thinking, that feels really good as a hiring manager.
Okay, that's great. So I think about, you ran through a couple of the questions that you might be able to expect to be asked in an interview, and most of them are the, tell me about a time when. Are there any other questions, general questions that you think are pretty standard for an interview that students could practice responses for?
Absolutely. So generally, we'll ask you, what interested you in this job? When you saw this job, what made you think you should apply? So have an answer ready for that. If your honest answer is, I applied for everything I saw, come up with something a little better, about, I really like that this would allow me to work directly with customers, or I love working outside, and so the fact that this would be working in landscaping fits right with what I love to do in the summer, or come up with an answer like that. Other questions might be, how do you like to learn? Are you best hands-on, or do you like to learn in writing or learning through a computer system? There's no really right or wrong answer to that. Just be honest if you have a preference, and it's totally fine to say, I think I can learn using any of those. If you really like to learn with a mentor or having somebody show you how to do something, that's a good time to say that. If they, like most companies, partner you up with somebody, they'll like that answer.
Great.
What else would be a typical question?
I can think of one that I've been asked.
Say, Lizzie, I bet you know some.
Well, I can think of one that it's just so basic, but it always kind of stumps me. And it's, tell me about yourself.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to paint this beautiful picture of who I am. And I hadn't even thought about it.
Yes. And that's where sometimes it gets hard to contain it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't start with, so I was born in this year and this location. I had somebody do that. They went on for a while about how their mom was short and they were a big baby and they were born by C-section. I'm like, that's weird. Don't tell me that. Too much.
Oh my gosh. About how long should an interview last? I've seen some that are quick, and then I've seen some that have taken a full hour. Is there a right answer to that?
Yeah, virtual ones have really shortened the process. And so I would go in with an hour free, but not be insulted at all if it's only 20 minutes.
Great.
Don't read into it.
Okay. A question here. If I talk a lot with my hands, should I try not to? That's a great
So how many of you notice my hands coming up? So it's pretty distracting for the other side. So trying to sit on your hands or keep them down, if you can. But if they do, don't freak out. If you see your hands on the screen, don't freak out. If you want to say, obviously, I talk with my hands, you can, but don't. I've had people that have brought that up, and then every single time their hands came up, they stopped the conversation to point out that they had done it again. Just let it go. Just speak freely.
Okay. Is it good to bring my own questions to the interview?
Absolutely. Now, it makes sense that when you get to the end of the interview, if they don't ask you, what questions do you have? Have your favorite, most important one ready and say, would it be possible for me to ask one question? And then ask that favorite one. So sometimes if they're on a really tight deadline, they don't give you that open-ended, what questions do you have? On the other hand, I have had people with 2 pages of questions, and they've drug our time limit out way too long on stuff we would have talked about in the next interview, especially benefits or pay or who will be doing my training or what's my career advancement opportunity. If you're close on the time frame, or you're not sure if you're close on the time frame, say, How many questions can I ask? And do you have time for one more, or should we stop there?
Okay. That's great. I've also been in interviews with pages of questions, and it's
Yes.
excruciating. What's a good way to end an interview? Should you ask any questions about when they'll get back to you, or will the interviewer most likely bring that up on their own?
Well, I would love to say that they're going to bring it up on their own. However, I've talked to so many people that said they waited weeks and weeks and weeks and didn't know if that meant that they didn't get the job or it was just taking a really long time to make a decision. And that is agonizing. So I don't believe that it is incorrect, as long as you're polite, for you to say, do you have a time frame in mind for next steps? And I think that opens it up. Usually they can tell you, yes, we should make a decision within the next 2 weeks, or the next step I can't move on to until I can go over this with this department manager, and they're out on vacation for 2 weeks.
Got it.
So that helps, give you a sense for how long is too long. And I'm going to say something there as an apology for my profession. HR people have been so inundated that they are not getting back to people that they're not hiring. Is that our time limit?
That's just a calendar reminder that.
Okay. Okay. And so I know personally that a lot of people have sat indefinitely and never heard back whether they got the job or didn't, and why they didn't get it. And they're just, the assumption is, if you don't hear from me, you didn't get it. And that's a horrible way to do business, but I know that it's happened. Please don't take it personal if that happens. Please do send an email, preferably, because if they're so busy, they're not going to want a phone call. But do find a way to send an email and say, I'm just following up to see if the position was filled.
Got it. I actually have a great, hopefully a great last question.
Okay.
I come from a thank you card family. And so I was taught that it's that the thing you do after an interview is either hand deliver or mail a handwritten thank you note. Is that a little corny, or do you still enjoy getting those as an HR specialist?
Yes, they're corny. It usually tells me more about your family than it does about you.
Mm-hmm.
But it does pull you back into my memory. And anything you can do that, it used to be when we sent paper resumes, they would tell you, put yours on light blue so that they remember you because you were the light blue paper, or spend a fortune on really expensive paper so they remember you in a stack. So it's that same theory of how do you make sure you get pulled out in that person's memory favorably. So I have felt just as recalled to the pleasantness of a person from an email as I ever did from an actual mailed letter. And anymore, it's easier for me to attach that thank you that I got by email to the application file in my system. So I've got, if otherwise I have nothing I can do with this piece of paper, and I'm going to throw it away or stuff it into an interview packet. Or if you get the job, maybe I'll put it in your personnel file.
Okay, great. That's good to know. I'll stop sending.
Oh, Vicki, I said, come on.
No, I will. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. I've learned a lot, and I hope that our attendees have too.
Oh, I hope. Good luck. Is there a way you can give them the slides?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
If you send them to me, I'd be happy to send them out to participants.
And
That'd
be great. And they've got them to review.
Lingering questions, please send them our way, and we'll make sure that Rachel gets those as well.
Absolutely.
And just a friendly reminder that next week's Working Wednesday is time management with Joshua Monhay. So we hope to see you all there, and thank you again, Rachel.
Yep, absolutely. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.